What's up, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We are once again co-branded with Packers Wire today, and joining me is the one and only Paul Bretl. You can find him on Twitter or X at Paul_Bretl. Paul, great to have you back on the show. We are still basking in a Packers playoff victory. 4 consecutive wins, actually. What a time to be alive. What a time to be a Packer fan.
No kidding. It's mid-January, and we still get the opportunity to talk about the Packers 2023 season. Just fantastic, and I hope you're staying warm out there, Andy.
I'm doing my best. Same to you. It has been quite chilly as of late. We're catching up on lost time after all of the mild weather that we had for so long. But this is unbelievable. Like for a while, like I almost planned. By the way, this is my bad here. I will admit my transgressions. I will confess my sins to everyone. I almost booked a flight out to New Orleans this upcoming weekend to go out with some friends. I had it booked, and I'm like, you know what? There's a chance that they could still be playing. And this was a few weeks ago. I'm like, what are the odds that they win in Carolina, and then Chicago and then Minnesota, or switch those obviously, and then win their first playoff game. I'm like, what are the odds they really win 4 games in a row? Like, I probably can just book this to nope. No, I cannot. And thank goodness I didn't. I came through in the end, but now this is amazing. What a journey. And it's just been a really special time to be a Packer fan.
Yeah, we hear the old cliche, there's at this time of the year, what do you want? You want a healthy team, and you want to be playing your best football. And especially on this Packers offensive side of the ball, they're definitely playing their best football. I mean, that unit's red hot right now. And from a healthy standpoint, they're definitely healthier. And, as much as you can be this time of the year, and given the injuries that have happened, they're getting pretty close in that area as well.
Injuries are getting a little bit better. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it's funny that you bring up playing your best football, because that was one of my big talking points back in training camp, but not in the usual sense. I said on multiple occasions, I want to see this team playing its best football so that they can carry that over into the 2024 season, not necessarily carry that over into January 2024 into a freaking playoff run. But yet here we are, early 2024, and they've carried that over from the end of last season, or the regular season, into the playoffs. They're playing their best football. This offense is lights out right now. I don't know what you draw up to stop these guys. I'll let you go in any direction that you want from the key talking points from this one, but I don't know how you go about stopping this offense.
Yeah, and I think the prime example of that is Jaden Reed and Christian Watson combined for 1 catch for 9 yards, and the offense put up 41 points. Jordan Love just had an incredibly efficient day. You got Romeo Doubs going for a career day with 152 yards, I believe it was. Love only had 21 pass attempts, and 6 of those were explosive plays, 20 or more yards. Like, just an incredibly dynamic, efficient performance. And obviously, a lot of the attention is on Jordan Love. And I just want to highlight that touchdown pass to Dontavian Wicks. I do my instant takeaways article after, and I use that as the example of someone who is just in complete control from start to finish. Uses the hard count, identifies the blitz, the play clock's running down. Like, even that aspect of it's like under 7 seconds, 5 seconds. He's making the protection adjustments all calm, communicating with the wide receivers. Play starts to unfold. One of the blitzers comes through, and even then he stays in the pocket. He's backpedaling, even goes with a little pump fake as the blitzer's coming in, and then just that arm talent that he has delivers an absolute dime to Dontavian Wicks. Like, again, from before the snap, through the snap to the throw, just beautiful execution from start to finish from Jordan Love. And I thought that's just a prime example of just where he is right now and his comfortability, his confidence. And I know we'll talk about the Niners a little bit later, but when you have a quarterback playing at that level, again, not saying they're going to win by any means, but when you have a quarterback playing at that level, gives you a shot, like when you have an elite play at the quarterback position. So just a truly incredible play, really efficient performance. On the defensive side of things, want to give credit to the execution from the players, the game plan from Joe Barry and perhaps Matt LaFleur as well, depending on how much he was a part of that conversation, but just a really good job of disguising coverages, mixing things up. Like from the beginning, especially that first half, Dak Prescott, that passing game was just disjointed, looked very much uncomfortable. The first reads weren't there for him to to go to, and that kind of had that trickle down effect towards that uncomfortable play. And last thing I'll say is, at Packers Wire, we do our predictions, on Fridays or Saturdays before the game. And hand up, haven't done that well this year predicting this team. I've been all over the place with them, not necessarily knowing what to expect week to week. But I did pick them this one, and not to pat myself on the back, but going into the reasoning behind it here. I think you could kind of see the path to victory here. Get the run game going, win the turnover battle, things that they did, things that were reasonable that you could see how they'd win. But I started off my explanation by talking about the underdog role. And I feel that that's something that this team has really, really embraced, that they like that flying under the radar. They like being, discounted, or, not having all the attention on them, and just continually going about their business. It just felt like in the weeks leading up to this game and the week prior, that was a role that they are fully invested in, that they've embraced. Aaron Jones talked about it after the game. And so honestly, that was part of kind of that gut feeling that you get in picking them. They're comfortable with where they're at, who they are. And for what I mentioned earlier, playing their best football, getting healthier, all those things. And so it just came to fruition on that football field, and just an absolute dominant performance from this Packers team.
Yeah, speaking of that underdog mentality in the offseason, I think I posted something on Twitter about, something about, again, this was when we were in the great offseason wars of whether or not it was a rebuild or not. And I mentioned the word. I think Keyshawn Nixon quote tweeted it. I know he did, and said something like, "No, we're screw this rebuild BS," or something to that extent. We're going out to win. I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I would want the team to say. Like, that's exactly what I want the players to say. And then of course, Bakhtiari comes on and he says something of in the offseason that the team is rebuilding or something, and then people ran with that. And then the team's sitting at 2-5. And then in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking see, this is kind of a rebuild, guys. This is kind of, and then this team has adopted that same mindset pretty much all season long that Keyshawn had in the offseason of rebuild, reboot, whatever, screw this. We're going to go out and win football games. They've embraced it. Like I said, that's exactly what you want to see from the players from day one. And they somehow have found their way into the divisional round playoff against the San Francisco 49ers. Green Bay's a little bit of their arch nemesis as of late, to say the least. I want to go back to the Dontavian Wicks, Jordan Love play, though. We've obviously talked about the Love portion of that. And, I know Justice and I talked about it a little bit yesterday as well. But as I rewatched it again today, because I can't stop rewatching that play, two other things stood out to me. At least it just sort of dawned on me as well. It's awesome that Jordan's doing all this stuff, and that's going to lend itself moving forward to him having more autonomy and control. That is golden. But the person who had to stay in and max protect is rookie Tucker Kraft. He has to also know that call from Jordan that was implemented in months past when they were facing more blitz heavy teams. And maybe when he wasn't even necessarily in the lineup at that time, because he might have been a backup at the time. But he had to not only know the call, but then live on an island one-on-one. I think it was an edge rush. I'd have to go back and look who was pressuring specifically on Kraft on the play, but I know he executed his block. He was awesome at it. So not only knowing that from Tucker Kraft of what Jordan was trying to accomplish by having him max protect, but then executing the block, that's a rookie. And then the guy catching the pass, Dontavian Wicks, also has to know everything that's going on, understand that he has to win at the top of his route. He does a great move at the top, gets the corner to lean a little bit outside. Wicks actually runs such a good route that he actually stumbles a little bit on the play and still is able to get up and just have acres of space to beat Stephon Gilmore on the play. But that's a first-year starting quarterback with a rookie tight end and a rookie wide receiver that are making that play go. So all the flowers in the world to Jordan, because that's all on him to get that all set up. But man, a ton of credit to two rookies in Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft for also doing exactly what needed to be done in that situation.
Yeah, and pivoting back to last week's conversation a little bit, where we were talking about kind of the off the field stuff that Love has brought to this team, that absolutely could be a product of all those Tuesdays that he spent with the receivers, with the tight ends, going through the film and what the checks are, how he wants them to run certain routes against certain coverages and all of that. That's one of those things that could just be a product in that specific moment of something that maybe happened a month ago or 2 months ago. And last thing I'll add is, when you're talking about the 49ers and, a team that's given obviously the Packers fits in the playoffs here as of late. I think one of the things that they have going for them and something that they've had going for them this year is the youth on this team, because especially on the offensive side of the ball, like a lot of these guys weren't a part of those previous losses to the 49ers in the playoffs. And I think to a degree, there's a benefit, there's a value in not knowing that you shouldn't win this game, not knowing what happened in 2021 or 2019 in the playoffs, and just going out there feeling confident, realizing you're playing your best football, and just going out there to try to execute.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think there's almost a beautiful ignorance in all of it of like, does age doesn't matter, like all of like experience doesn't matter. This is just football. They've all played it for forever. And it's just going out and executing what's asked of them by the coaches. And they're just doing it at a super high level. Well, let's stick to the offense here for a second. I want to talk about a couple wide receivers. The first one is one that you mentioned already in Romeo Doubs. I don't want to say that like Romeo's been like totally forgotten by any stretch of the imagination. I think everyone still recognizes he's a good football player. But at the same token, it's super easy, and it sort of has gotten to this of like, oh my goodness, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, even Bo Melton. Like, and then a lot of conversation is on Christian Watson, and is he available? Is he not available? What he brings to the team when he is available, what a letdown it is when he's not available. And then just like kind of like by the side, doing his own thing, not super flashy, not loud in the locker room, is Romeo Doubs, who just continues to be the picture of consistency, not complaining when he doesn't get the ball. And then, when you need 6 targets to go his way, he can put up 6 for 151 and a touchdown in a massive performance. This is a really good wide receiver that I think brings something different to their wide receiver group that a Wicks and a Watson and a Melton and all those guys, for as great as they are, I think Doubs does bring something different to the table. And this just goes to show the embarrassment of riches that they have at the position and why like you can't have enough, because you brought up, I think Watson had 1 catch and Reed had none. I'll even add on to that. Melton had 1 and Malik Heath wasn't even active. Like 4 of those wide receivers that we're all excited about combined for 2 catches, and one guy had to be inactive just because of the numbers game. But in this situation, it was Doubs. Last week, it was Reed. 2 weeks ago, it was Bo Melton. This week, it might be Dontavian Wicks. The week after that, it might be Watson. That's what is going to be. And I think the great thing is it doesn't necessarily seem like any of these guys are getting frustrated or upset. Matt's mentioned that on a couple different occasions. And Jordan can just go through his progressions, and the Packers can put in the position, the players in positions to be successful. If they think like, hey, we need a bigger possession wide receiver to run this sort of thing, all right, let's get Romeo in there. If they need a speed guy to stretch the field, let's get Christian in there. Like, they all have something different they bring. But I think it's important that we don't forget of exactly what Romeo Doubs can still bring to this team.
Yeah, I believe Adam Stenovich referred to him as kind of I think he said security net for Jordan Love this season, because of all the ups and downs that have gone on at that wide receiver room. Romeo Doubs, not that he hasn't had some of his own, but he's been the stabilizing force within that room. He started in all 18 games, up to this point in the season for the Packers. Has come through countless times in those key pivotal moments in the red zone, on third downs. I believe on third or fourth down this season, he's caught 19 of his 30 passes his way, with 16 of those 19 going for a first down. Inside the 10-yard line, he's caught 6 of 9 passes, with all 6 going for a touchdown. Matt LaFleur continually goes back to the strong hands that Romeo Doubs has. And every time he references that, I just think back to that Chargers touchdown in those final few minutes in that left corner of the end zone, just how quickly he can go up and snatch that ball. So yeah, again, he doesn't have the speed like Reed and Watson does. Wicks obviously has the ability as a route runner, and Doubs does to a degree as well, but he's just been such a stabilizing force. And I really like that you mentioned how well these guys work together. I think it was after this last game where Matt LaFleur said that, you would have thought Christian Watson and Jaden Reed had the 100-yard performance with just how excited they were for Romeo Doubs. And it wasn't just because it was Doubs. It was after the Minnesota game where Bo Melton had the 100-yard performance. Like, that receiver room is really, really close, really, really tight knit. And I think for the coaches and just going about the game planning and just everything about this process that goes into what we see on Sunday, I think it just makes all of that all the more easier for that aspect of it, being able to go out there and execute, and just them being able to cheer each other on, root each other on. And then to Jordan Love, he's going where the read says and what the defense does. It doesn't, outside of that, there doesn't seem to be any sort of, favorites or anything along those lines. It's just what the defense is doing. That's where the ball's going. And that's why we see, for one, nobody having 100-yard performance because the ball's being spread around. And then now it's been three guys, 3 straight weeks in a row, but all different players. And when we talk about stress and defenses, I mean, man, that's a great way to do it when literally it could be a high pressure situation, a key moment in the game, and you got Christian Watson and Jaden Reed out there, but you also have to worry just as much about Bo Melton getting the ball too.
And like, what was it? Malik Heath, that he dropped the touchdown in the end zone, and then he came right back to him on the deep out for a touchdown right after that. Like, he does not care. Like, if whoever is in there, and like they've all pretty much come up big when needed too. It's crazy, and it extends to the tight ends, Aaron Jones as well. They're just rich with talent, and it's really fun to see this offense operating on all levels. I want to talk about one other wide receiver, and that is Christian Watson. We saw him get back this week, 1 catch, not exactly like this dynamic playmaker, but I thought one specific play, I posted on Twitter, I think you retweeted it as well, was a play where Christian's running down. I think he's running like a deep, like basically like a crosser. He's just literally like stretching the field all the way across it. And you get to the like end of the play, and Christian's triangulated by 3 defenders. And then Romeo Doubs is just chilling in the middle of the field wide open. And that's one of the Doubs plays that gets, I don't know, 20, 30 yards on the play. I forget what it was, but just that presence of Watson streaking down the field has a gravity towards it. He's just like a black hole. He just pulls everything towards him, and it opens everything up underneath. It's not like Watson was in on all of these Romeo plays, but it shouldn't be lost that like you get your speed guy back, and look, like underneath, middle of the field, look what's open a lot more. Romeo Doubs, your possession receiver, chilling out there in some space, because you've got Musgrave, you've got Watson, you've got Reed, you've got Melton, you've got speed on the field that is stretching them vertically, horizontally. And now guys like Kraft and Musgrave and Doubs, who want to live in the middle of the field, don't be surprised if they can eat even more, because so much of the defense has to be worried about those playmakers on the outside. I thought that one play by Watson was such a perfect picture of exactly that.
Yeah, we talk about the different skill sets that these guys have, and in some capacities there's some interchangeability that they have as well, but there isn't anyone, even with the speed that Reed might have or Melton that might have, that can do or bring to the table what Christian Watson does with the size and speed combination. And Jaden Reed talked about this a few weeks ago when Watson first came back to practice from the hamstring injury, and just that him as on the field with Watson can feel his presence just in how the defense is reacting, how they're defending the other receivers, and just the opportunities that creates for everyone else out there. And so he's not someone who's, the stat sheet doesn't always, to your point, do justice to what his impact is when he's on the field with them.
No, totally. And I again, he's one of those players that he's a little bit of a force multiplier. When he's out on the field, he makes other people better, just because there is that gravity towards him and making sure he cannot get those big plays down the field. But you see 3 defenders just kind of, again, cornering them, and you just see like, oh yeah, the other people are going to be open, because there's a fear of what Watson can do out on the field. All right, sticking with the offense before we switch over to the defense, this offensive line deserves so much credit as well for their performance in this game. Zach Tom was phenomenal. Like, listen, these Dallas defenders are going to get some wins as well. You're not going into Dallas against this defensive line and just have like pitching a shutout. They're going to get theirs at time, but for the opponent that you're playing in their house, what this offensive line did both in run blocking and in pass protection was super impressive. And there was positive grades almost all around for the offensive line. They deserve so much credit in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys came into this game as the number 1 defense in terms of pressure rate this season, and Love was only pressured on 4 of his 21 dropbacks. And we all know Aaron Jones had another 100-yard game, 5.6 yards per rush. Like, they are just playing so well together right now. And I know I mentioned last week John Runyon's comments about the coaching staff doing a really good job about putting them in position to be successful. But I mean, what a turnaround that this unit's had from the start of the season, because all those issues that stood out with Love's inaccuracy, the receivers, the wrong routes, drop passes, all that. Like the offensive line was a contributor as well. Like the Packers had no run game early on in the season. There was a stretch where, Love was under pressure at a pretty heavy rate. And once they started that rotation along the offensive line at left tackle and right guard in week 9, that's where things really started to turn over for this team. And I know several of the coaches have commented on how they love the competition that fostered and how that elevated the play of everyone around them. And not just for the Packers, but for any team. Success is going to start up front. And when you have a run game like the Packers do right now, that's averaging over 5 yards per carry, Aaron Jones having the success that he does, and you're given quarterback like Jordan Love, who's playing at the level that he's at, time. I mean, that's a ridiculous combo for defenses to have to match up with. Like I mentioned at the start, they had 6 explosive plays in 16 completions, while Aaron Jones is averaging almost 6 yards per carry. Like if you're defense, what are you going to do in those situations when you have to defend both of those, efficient passing, efficient running games? And one other thing off of this, those 4 pressures that Jordan Love had on his dropbacks, he was 4 for 4 for like 115 yards and a touchdown. He's been one of the most efficient, most effective quarterbacks when under pressure since week 14 of the regular season. He's been so good. And of all the areas that he's experienced growth in this season, I mean, that one in particular has been where he's made some of the biggest jumps with it.
Yeah, totally. I have one semi-hot take on the offensive line moving forward. We saw earlier there was great competition between John Runyon Jr. and Sean Ryan, Yash Nyman and Rasheed Walker. And there came a time where they recognized, all right, Walker's just outplaying Yash. Like, it's great that we had the competition. It's great to get Yash snaps, but we've reached a point in the season where the better player is just in need of playing. And that was Rasheed Walker, clearly and obviously. They made the move and he's been the starter and the full-time player ever since. If you would have told me I would have been saying this a handful of weeks ago, I would not have believed you. But John Runyon Jr. just needs to take that spot, in my opinion, at right guard. He has played so much better over the last 5 weeks. He has a plus 1.25 grade for me over the past 5 weeks. He's still my lowest graded player on the season, which just gives you an idea of like, the difference between where he was at. Like we were reaching like almost like Byron Bell territory with Runyon for a while, at least where it was trending. So these past 5 weeks for him to go from that to legitimately grading in the positive every single week. To me, he's earned his spot back. I don't think Sean Ryan's done enough to be like, this is different or better in a drastic way. I get that Runyon might be gone in the offseason. This is the playoffs now. And I think you just have to play the player that's been hotter in the moment. And for me, over the past 5 weeks, when the games have mattered most, that's been Runyon. I'm not upset if they want to keep it going. I don't think it's like anything egregious or drastic, but I do think it's to the point where Runyon's playing noticeably better and you're in the playoffs and just play the better guy at this point. You can go in any direction you want with that. But for me, and again, I'm shocked I'm saying this. If you would have told 5-6 weeks ago, Andy, that I was saying this, I would not have believed you. But right now, I just think he's playing better.
Yeah, like you mentioned with Walker and Nyman, there was this lag time between where it seemed pretty clear that, all right, Walker's the guy, before he eventually became the guy and was the one holding down those snaps. And when Adam Stenavich is talking each week, like he doesn't hide very well how he feels about certain players or how they're performing. And when he talks about John Runyon, it's a lot of glowing comments about him. When it's Sean Ryan, of course, there's positives, but he was very quick to pivot to specifically pass blocking as somewhere where he has to improve. And when asked if, Ryan could be someone that they could lean upon, looking ahead to 2024 and beyond, wasn't a foregone conclusion. That's it. It's, hey, he's still got some things to work on before he can be a full-time guard starting in the NFL. So to your point, I think from just kind of how Adam Stenavich addresses these comments, sometimes I think that's where the thinking is. But like we talked about at left tackle, there was that lag time before that decision was made. And perhaps because they're in the midst of a playoff run, things are working so well, maybe they don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah, it's totally plausible and it's totally understandable if that's true. But that's an interesting one to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. All right, let's jump to the defense. I want to start with a player I know you wrote about. I actually wrote about him in my grades article today as well. it doesn't take a genius or anyone watching the all 22 every play to understand that Darnell Savage had a great game in this one. Anytime you get a pick six, that's going to be a good day at the office. But I actually thought he had a really nice day, even outside the pick six. Matt LaFleur talked about his communication ability. With this game, for me, Darnell has now moved into the top 5 in grades on defense this year. He was just kind of like middling through the course of this year, and then he has a really big game in the playoffs, which bumped it up. But this has been an interesting scenario where going into the year, he had that sort of albatross of a guaranteed contract that they couldn't get off of. They couldn't trade that contract away. Releasing him doesn't do anything because you have to pay the whole contract anyway. He's basically like guaranteed to be on the roster no matter what. I'm impressed by Savage. I think this is the second best year of his career outside of 2020 so far. He's an unrestricted free agent in the offseason. I don't expect that they are going to like get any sort of long-term deal done. And I think there's still a decent chance that maybe they just want to try to go in a different direction, maybe get younger and maybe get some new blood in that safety room. But I think he's definitely raised the stakes a little bit and re-entered the conversation of, hey, I've put together a pretty good season. And he's coming off arguably maybe the best game of his career against Dallas. I'll just leave it at that this is a great game for Darnell, and he's kind of back in the conversation of like, is he back next year or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just in addition to how he's performed on the football field, I think a lot of some of the other factors I should say are going to be the other stuff that he brings to the equation. Since the summer, Matt LaFleur has, when speaking about Savage, has spoken glowingly about his leadership that he's shown, that he's taken on, because being in the room previously with, a player like Adrian Amos, a veteran, it didn't sound like Savage's leadership qualities were necessarily showing too, but now where he's I guess the older player in that room, from an experience standpoint, at least, he's taken on that role and done a really good job in it. And when he was on IR, you would see up from the press box, pre-game as they're going through warmups, there's Darnell Savage in the middle of everything, getting everyone excited and just being a part of it, still being in the mix with the team, even though he had been out for that time period. And I think Matt LaFleur, when asked about that, said that approach isn't always normal, isn't always something that you see. And again, goes back to that leadership aspect of it. And for the communication, I remember, I think it was after the Panthers game, I had mentioned that I just wonder how much Darnell Savage not being in there is affecting that communication aspect of it. And since he's been back the last 3 games, Minnesota, Chicago, and now Dallas, that aspect of this Packers team has been a lot more buttoned up. We're not seeing the same massive blown coverage assignments. We're not seeing, everyone scrambling last second, trying to figure out where they're supposed to be, what their responsibilities are. And in no way am I saying that's only because of Darnell Savage. It's football. There's a million different factors. Jair Alexander playing at a high level right now. Matt LaFleur mentioning that he's going to take on a little bit more of the responsibilities on defense. And now we're seeing some changes. Again, there's a million factors to this. But I also don't think it's a coincidence either that things start to improve in that regard when Darnell Savage is back in the mix. And I asked Matt LaFleur about that, and he said this is his strength. This is one of the things that he does very, very good, making those last-second checks, making sure that everyone knows where they're supposed to be, their responsibilities, their assignments, all of that. And so I think that's been his role has been a key factor in that improvement within that part of the defense.
Yeah, you bring up another great point just in sort of the calculus of whether or not to bring him back. He has missed 7 games this year, so he has been nicked up on a couple different occasions, and that's definitely been a little bit of an issue for him. But overall, really nice season for Darnell. I think we went into this season thinking that safety room might not only just be like the worst unit on the team, but might be one of like the worst positional groups in football. And they deserve a lot of credit because I don't think anyone's like writing home about like, oh my goodness, they have this great safety room, but they've been solid all season long. And I think that's about all you could ask from that safety room going into this season. Let's stick on defense. I want to talk to you about the loss of Kingsley, JJ, and Igbare, because I think this is a manageable injury, but at the same token, he plays a lot and he's actually been making a pretty decent impact over the second half of this season. They have the bodies at the position, meaning they've got Rashan, they've got Preston Smith, you've got a first-round pick in LVN, and then you still have Brenton Cox that's on the active roster. It's not like it's not like when they lost Rashan last year, and it's not like a
Mhm.
situation where you've got to play a bunch of Ladarius Hamiltons and Tipa Naliais. This is not that same sort of situation, but this is still definitely a loss for the defense.
Yeah, I mean, LVN's gonna probably have to take on a little bit of a larger role. He's been in that second rotation with Enagbari this season, and then they're gonna have to most likely rely on Brenton Cox to some degree. I mean, going in with you can't go into a game with a three-man edge rusher rotation. Like he's going to have to take some snaps in this game, and his first
Yep.
significant. I think he's got 5 or 6 snaps in 3 games that he's been active this season. So his first, quote unquote significant playing time is going to be in the NFC divisional round. And we, saw him flash in the preseason. On the football field, but obviously it's a different animal this time of the year. So that depth is going to be tested just because naturally edge rusher is such a heavily rotated position. You got your Smith and Gary, like you mentioned, LVN, but you're going to have to rely on your undrafted rookie who's only seen a handful of snaps to go in and play some meaningful downs for you against the San Francisco team. And for that offense and how they operate and just the efficiency that Brock Purdy operates with and getting the ball out of his hands, like even if the Packers were at full capacity at the edge rusher position, like that opponent is going to be a challenge because you got to get there quick. Otherwise, he's going to have that time and they'll just be able to pick you apart like they've done to so many other opponents this season. So that aspect is definitely going to be tested. And, Enagbari, he's definitely made that progress in year 2 that you hope to see from players, especially from a day 3 pick to playing so many meaningful snaps and someone who's held his own, in the run game and someone who's become more productive as a pass rusher.
I'm going to add 2 little wrinkles to this conversation. Late in this game when Enagbare goes down, and then I think Preston's been a little bit banged up, so they're trying to do some different things. They did a couple looks where I think it was a couple snaps where Enagbare and Carl Brooks were on the edge as like hand in the dirt defensive ends in like almost like a 4-3 sort of look, but it was only 2 linebackers, but you get my point. It wouldn't shock me, especially against San Francisco with their running ability, if they didn't feel like Brenton Cox was a player that they wanted to put a bunch on his plate. If all of a sudden to get Carl Brooks a little bit more involved, if he got a little bit of time on the edge. And like I said, he saw a couple plays there, hand on the ground. It wasn't like he was standing up or anything, which also he did do in college. I think that's one thing that they could potentially look at if, again, they didn't want to put a bunch on Brenton Cox's plate in a playoff divisional round game, like welcome to the NFL, kid. And then the second thing I will say is I said something similar last week. Rashan has not been playing poorly, but he has not been the impact player that Green Bay really needs him to be, especially in games like this. This is his PFF. So he had the 91.9 grade against Detroit. He had 3 sacks in that game, massive impact. Since that time, he has 1 sack, which was a week later against Kansas City. His PFF grades after that 91.9 performance, and their average is 60 for those out there who haven't followed PFF closely. 58.9, 58.6, 62.4, 55.9, 73.1, 66.9, 59.7. In that Detroit game for me, I had him at a plus 1.95 grade, different grading systems, obviously. Ever since then, negative 0.1, negative 0.7, plus 0.15, negative 0.45, negative 0.2, negative 0.05, negative 0.4. It just hasn't been the same impact. And while there have been some games, they credit him with 8 pressures against Minnesota in that particular game. In these last 2 games against Chicago and Detroit, he has 3 total pressures in those games. And I want to say it one more time. I'm not saying that Rashan's playing poorly or that he's like this bad player or anything like that. He's been fine. He's mostly been doing his job more often than not, but it hasn't been the same sort of impact. They need, especially with Enagbare out, they need Rashan to play. He has not played over, these are his snap counts. 30 since the Giants game, 39, 37, 41, 34, 34, 39. Only 1 game over 40 snaps, and that was 41 against Carolina. They need him in that 40 to 45 range, in my opinion, and they need him to be super impactful. This is a big Rashan Gary game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And the interior defensive line is going to have to continue playing, at the level that they've been at, generating that push inside. And I think that's helped absorb some of the the edge rusher position not necessarily getting home as frequently because they've been able to either produce some pressure sack opportunities for them, or the interior defensive line in general has been able to take care of it. And then, like you mentioned, factor in that 49ers run game. It's going to be a challenge.
A couple quick ones before we get out of here. Let's start with the injury report for this week that was released. It was a estimation since they did not actually practice, but this is their estimation, and I'll let you kind of point out anything that stood out to you. Jair Alexander limited, Kenny Clark limited, Dylan did not practice, Enigbari obviously did not practice, Rashan Gary limited, Elton did not practice, Aaron Jones limited, Isaiah McDuffie did not practice with that neck injury. Keyshawn, Owens, Reed, and Savage were all limited. Preston Smith did not practice. Quay Walker was a full participant, and then Christian Watson was limited. What stood out to you on that initial estimated injury report?
I think the big one, the fact that Jair was out there, or estimated, or would have been out there practicing. That ankle injury that he suffered last week, that took him out of the final 2 practices for the Packers. So the fact that he sustained, another injury on Sunday to that ankle, but was, would have been out there in some capacity, I think is definitely a good sign. Quay Walker being a full participant looked like he might have gotten a little banged up in that game. Isaiah McDuffie did not participate. He was taking some snaps and looked like some early down situations, playing alongside Quay Walker. So he's been has been a factor on that defense, even with Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell being healthy. So something to watch there, just given his potential new role that's emerging. Preston Smith, Elton Jenkins, this seems to be, we'll find out more on Wednesday, but this seems to be kind of part of the trend. It definitely has been for Jenkins for an extended period of time. And then AJ Dillon still not participating. Aaron Jones is playing at a really high level. He's had over 20 carries in each of these games, but just having someone that you can rely on a little bit more versus a Emmanuel Wilson or a Patrick Taylor to shoulder some of that just kind of overall workload, obviously is valuable to have.
Yeah, Jair, the shoulder and the ankle. Aaron Jones added, I don't think he had a finger injury prior, did he? He's got a knee and a finger injury. Yeah, so a couple things that stood out, but you nailed pretty much all of them. All right, quickly on Packers 49ers, what are some of the keys that you're going to be watching as we start getting prepped for this huge game on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm just really excited to see this Packers offense go against that 49ers defense, because that's might be their biggest test of the season, going against that unit, because you look at every level. There's Bosa and Young at edge rusher. You got Fred Warner at linebacker. Travarius Ward has been one of the best in football at making plays on the ball this season. They're one of the best at slowing the run. They're one of the best at yards per pass attempts in terms of limiting quarterbacks. Like, pick a category on the defensive side of the ball, and you're probably going to see the 49ers ranked up there, fairly high. And so I'm just excited to see how this Packers team handles that. One, just the atmosphere on the road, a playoff divisional game, but an opponent of that caliber. Like Matt LaFleur said, he called them the class of the NFC, one of the elite teams in the NFL. And so I'm just curious to see how the Packers offense handles that defense. And while, the point spread has the Niners favored by like 10 or something like that, and as good as that defense is, there's no defense out there right now, I don't care how good they are, that sees what the Packers are doing and what they're putting on tape and is excited to play that offense. The Packers are going to present their own challenges as well. Of course, doesn't mean they're going to win. Like you said, I'm excited to see how just kind of the game unfolds, but nobody's excited to play this Packers offense. Like I mentioned earlier, when you have Jordan Love playing at that elite level, when you have the offensive line carving running lanes, providing time in the pocket, Aaron Jones playing the way he is, the wide receivers, the tight ends, just what they bring and how they stress defenses with any of them being targeted, all these things that we've talked about, in recent weeks. Opponents aren't excited to play that because this is a red hot Packers offense. And so I'm just excited to see how that aspect unfolds. And there's going to, there's no real secret sauce to it. The little things always matter, but we know they're magnified in the playoffs. Limit the penalties, no turnovers on offense, take advantage of your red zone opportunities. It's going to, get the run game going so you don't become one dimensional behind the sticks. It's the things like that that are going to play huge, huge factors in this as well.
Yeah, it's an exciting matchup against a team that has been a bit of a juggernaut. They've had their weak points this season. They're beatable. They're not, it's like this unstoppable team, but they're just supercharged in so many key areas. think this is such a Brock Purdy game, in my opinion. And, can you get Brock Purdy to make some of the mistakes that you really need this 49ers team to make? McCaffrey is such a dynamic playmaker in the backfield. And then, you just have so many options off of that, of like, just as soon as you start worrying about McCaffrey, then it's Debo, and then it's Ayuk, and then it's Kittle. And then it's just like, as much of an embarrassment of riches that Green Bay has, of like all of these different flavors, San Francisco has those flavors, but like inexperienced all pro players at almost all those positions. And Kyle Shanahan as a, just masterful offensive mind that knows how to utilize all of it. But I think Jordan's playing as well as any quarterback can in the NFL right now. And that gives you a puncher's chance in every game. It's a huge challenge. It's a massive challenge. The 10 seems so strong to me. I don't get it. I don't know how you watch this recent Green Bay team and decide 10 points is the right spread for this one. That just seems super aggressive, but Vegas knows usually sometimes, but man, I'm excited to see if this team can shock the world. And to our conversation at the beginning, this team seems to very much like those sort of situations, and it's almost when they've done best this year. So bring on the 10-point spread. I don't mind it one bit. Last but not least, just as everyone's getting ready for Packers 49ers, Goody says, hold up. Roster building is a 365-day-a-year process, and we need to start looking ahead to the 2024 next season. He brings in Deslin Alexander, DeAndre Johnson, and Christian Young, 3 linebackers, and says we're starting our prep for next year already. No, I'm being facetious, but obviously Goody saw something in the workouts that he liked. Christian Young, I believe, was a practice squad player at one point this year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have anything to say here on any of these guys, but any thoughts on their 3 pickups?
Not specifically on them. With these future contracts, I think we see anywhere typically from 12 to 15 guys that the Packers are going to sign to build towards their 90-man roster for 2024. And a lot of players on that are going to be current practice squad players once the season ends.
Yeah, so if anyone's really, really hoping for Deslin Alexander to step in and play for the injured Kingsley Enagbare this week, that will not happen. This is a futures contract. They are not eligible to play on this year's team. They are not on this year's roster. They have to wait until the season is over, and then they can ramp up in the offseason and be part of the offseason programs and those sort of things. Paul, amazing stuff as always. Any final thoughts or anything that you want to plug on your way out?
I'll just add this one. I loved Matt LaFleur's quote on Monday, just talking about this matchup with the Niners, and to the effect it's a great challenge, but it's a great opportunity as well. Love that mindset.
Love it. No, I totally love it. Of course, well, I'll let you take it over. Where can we find all of your awesome work?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Find all my work over at Packers Wire. Head over to YouTube, Paul Bretl channel. Hit subscribe. I appreciate it.
Yeah, make sure to give him a follow. He does amazing work every single week. We love having him here on Pack-A-Day as well. You can find the Pack-A-Day podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcasts, so conveniently named. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. That is going to do it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.